Let's settle this debate once and for all. Who is more important, closers or setters? And most people assume that the answer is both. But here's the truth that nobody talks about, at least that I have seen nobody talk about. At the beginning stages of your business, closers are more important. Why? Because they can do the job of a setter as well, and they can do both jobs at once. They can prospect, they can follow up, and most importantly, they can close deals. But once you scale, trying to have your closer do everything is like asking Steph Curry to rebound, defend, coach, and sell popcorn at halftime. It breaks your entire system. So in this video, I'll break down exactly when closers matter most, when setters become a non-negotiable, and how to structure your team as you scale. And the one ratio I would recommend every founder follow. So let's not fluff anymore, let's hop right in. So the first part to this is that closers always come first when your volume is low, okay? And here's why closers matter most early on. Number one, they can do the job of a setter and a closer, okay? Number two, they can build rapport, they can qualify, they can re-engage all leads, and they close deals. And that's exactly what you need in the early stages of your business. Somebody that can wear multiple hats, right? Somebody that can follow up manually and convert attention into cash. You don't need automation and stuff like that when you first start with your business, right? You need somebody that wants to win, right? And it can actually do this work manually. But here's where it becomes dangerous. If your closer is chasing no-shows, confirming appointments, answering DMs, and running sales calls, you're not scaling, you're gonna be babysitting. And every minute your closer spends off the phone is not revenue collected. So basically every minute that they're off the phone is lost revenue, right? And that brings us to the turning point of when to bring in a setter, okay? Now, here's where most founders get stuck. As your lead volume increases, right, your closer's calendar fills up naturally. They start skipping follow-ups, they stop chasing no-shows, and they rush rapport building just to get to the next pitch. I have seen this, and this has happened in my business as well years and years and years ago. And guess what? Eventually what's gonna happen is that the closer's close rate is going to drop. Why? Because you're asking your closer to run 2 full-time jobs at scale, right? It's all good and well if your closer runs 2 or wears 2 hats at the beginning of the business, right? Because again, if you take your sales calls, this offers or differs by offers, but if your average sales call is an hour long, right? Your closer can potentially only handle 6 to 8 calls on a daily basis, right? At the beginning, if they only handle 2 to 3 calls, they can do the job of a setter. But at scale, if they are getting 6 to 8 appointments on their calendar every single day, there is no way you can expect your closer to wear 2 hats and to do a setter's job as well, okay? Because again, you know, your closer at the beginning can be your follow-up strategist, right? And they can also be your revenue producer by closing actual deals. But that is not scalable, okay? If a closer, here's a rule of thumb. If a closer is spending 2 hours a day chasing no-shows and leads, that's 2 fewer hours on calls where they should be collecting revenue, right? And again, if you hypothetically, at a 50% close rate and there's an hour-long call per prospect you talk with, that's a deal a day that they're losing, right? Again, hypothetical reason. And here's where setters enter the picture, because you're probably sitting there and thinking, okay, that's all good and well, I get it at the beginning of my business, if the call volume's low, only have a closer, they can wear multiple hats. But where's that point where I bring in setters into the business, okay? Now, once your lead flow is scaling and your closer's bandwidth is tapped, right? That's at the point where you bring in your setters, right? Now, let's just run the numbers on this because it's simple math. So let's just say you're generating roughly 100 leads a week, okay? And again, no earnings claims are made here. This is specifically just an example because again, look, I cannot sit here and guess what your numbers are, your lead flow, how many leads you're getting, what your conversions are, what your offer is, what your price point is at. I cannot guess that through a camera unless we talk to each other about this, right? But again, let's just for assumption's sake, just use an example here that we're generating 100 leads per week, right? Now, again, this is gonna be very different, right? And again, there's no specific number I can give you, so we have to basically generalize here, okay? Now, out of these 100 calls a week, right, we have to basically figure out how many calls we can actually get from this. Again, it's gonna be different by offer, but let's just say, you know, your funnel is an insane funnel, right? Probably not, mine isn't even this good. But let's just say you get 30 booked calls, okay? 30 calls from 100 leads a week, which is really good, okay? My question to you is, what happens to the 70 calls or the 70 leads that did not book a call? What happens to them? Most founders that I talk to and most founders that I see basically shrug their shoulders and say, okay, well, they didn't book a call, whatever, right? That is exactly where a setter comes in, right? Because again, let's just look at it. If your setter closes or your closer closes at a 25% close rate, close rate, okay? So if your closer closes at a 25% close rate, out of those 30 calls, there will actually be 7.5 deals, right? Specifically. Now, if you have a setter in this, right, and let's just say the setter can convert, let's just say 20 calls, right? Again, this is going to be different by offer, by everything. There's no kind of set rules that I can say, hey, a setter is going to get you X amount or convert X amount of closers and so on and so forth. But let's just say out of these 70 leads that basically did not move through and book a call, a closer is going to call, or a setter is going to call every single one of those leads, right? And let's just say for an example purposes, they basically get another 20 book calls out of those 70 leads, okay? Now again, that's an additional 20 calls on the calendar, right? Now, if we take this 20 plus 30, that's 50 total calls that the closer is going to get. And if the closer's closing percentage remains at 25%, which it should, that is 12.5 deals, okay? So you can specifically see here, and again, this is example purposes, no earnings claims are made here or no performance guarantees. However, if there is a percentage that the setters are going to convert from those unconverted leads, right? That is a fact. There is a percentage that the closers or that the setters is going to convert. And again, this is powerful. Why? Because now the closers, right? The setters aren't really just protecting the closer's calendar, right? They are actually making sure that the closers are talking to the correct people, right? So the setters are not only qualifying, but they're also protecting the space on the closer's calendar so they can make sure that the people that the setters talk with, right, they actually show up to the call. They're actually qualified to talk with the closer, and they actually have the cash to move forward. Because again, remember, setters don't create more leads. They convert the leads you already have and you're already getting, right? They are basically funnel efficiency multipliers, right? They make sure that you basically convert every single lead that you are paying for, because remember, every lead that you get, you are paying for unless it is obviously organic, right? And those leads cost money. So a lot of founders will say, oh, let's just scale the ads, get more calls. No, the answer is, especially in this day and age with we're going through a trust recession and there's so little trust between people. It's so important in this day and age that we basically maximize every single lead that we get, okay? Now, here's the part that most people forget. Closers should not be accessible, okay? They should feel like the specialist, the expert, the final boss in the game. And when a prospect talks to a setter first, that setter frames the closer as someone who's important, someone that's selective, and someone who's hard to get on the calendar with. So you're basically putting the closer up on a pedestal and you build the status naturally. Okay, this changes the frame of the sales call completely, and your close rate hypothetically could go up instead of down, right? So it's so important that you do this, and that's one of the jobs of a setter, is to put the closer on a pedestal, right? Now, how do you structure this, you might be asking, and you're probably asking, well, that's all good and well, but Craig, how does setters and closers work together, and what is the ratio between setters and closers, right? If you want my recommendation, always work on a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning one setter per closer. And again, this is not some, a random staffing decision. It's a performance-based decision, because when each setter owns one closer's calendar, they build rapport together. They learn from each other, and the setter understands how the closers sell, okay? And then there's going to be a tight feedback loop between which close leads are good and which close are not good, okay? And then ultimately they're going to improve the conversation and the throughput and the conversions over time. Again, this duo becomes a sales machine. Now, you might be sitting there wondering, okay, well, that's good and well, but what are the stats that back this up? Now, I found a Harvard Business Review study that basically said that companies that follow up with a lead within 5 minutes are 9 times more likely to convert them, right? But guess what? Most closers never follow up within 5 minutes. Why? Because they're too busy taking calls, okay? And this is exactly what setters solve, right? They create that rapport immediately, qualifies the prospects, right? Make sure that they're talking to the right people. And then if they are the right people, they're going to put the closer on a pedestal, talk them up, and basically make sure that, hey, the prospect understands that you're going to be talking with somebody that nobody really gets to talk with, right? Why? Because you create that personal touch, right? And that's just super, super important. Now, another study that I found interesting was that, I believe it was Gong.io, also found that sales reps who specialize basically just closing, not chasing leads, have a 22% higher productivity and a shortened sales cycle by 14%. Okay, so when you separate those two roles, you scale faster with fewer mistakes. Okay, which is very, very, very important. Okay, now here's the kicker. Right now, everybody's running towards AI, automation, and bot-based funnels, which means human touch is becoming a luxury, right? And again, setters, real humans who follow up manually with voice notes, selfie video messages, and so on and so forth, they build trust, and that is going to be your edge for the next coming years. I've already done it in my business. I've gotten rid of so many automations, so many just like bot chats and so on and so forth, because at the end of the day, if the 99% goes here, if you go there, you're going to be part of the 99%. You want your business to be in the top 1% of businesses in your industry, right? I'm assuming, right? Otherwise you won't be watching this video. And if that is the route that you want to take, you have to take the route of the 1%. So do the opposite of the 99%. So if everybody's flying towards AI, guess what? All the leads are going to be talking with AI chat boxes, and all these automations, right? When people crave a human connection, and real human connections convert more than AI chat boxes, okay? Because why? People want to talk to real people, okay? So again, here's the play. If you're just starting out, hire a closer. Let the closer do it all, okay? Once the lead volume increases, however, install a dedicated setter that works hand in hand with a closer. Again, the structure that you should have is a 1-to-1 ratio, okay? That is your efficiency machine, okay? And if you don't want to spend 40 plus hours a month recruiting, training, and gambling on random hires, click the link below and chat with us. That's exactly what we do here at Sales Match. We will be your recruiting partner. We will vet, test, and place closers and setters into your business, and then match them to your businesses based on your offer, your team structure, and your goals. So you don't have to go through any of the groundwork of finding the very best closers or setters. We can do that for you and provide you the cream of the crop candidates. So I really hope this video helped, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.